aquí.
I want to start just to get to know you guys a little bit for the audience. When you're at Cannes and you meet someone you haven't met, what do you say? What do you want them to know about who you are and why you're here?
Someone I haven't met. I usually meet with people I know already. I try to be inaccessible. But generally when I'm meeting with people here, what I want them to know, of course, is what we do. And generally, I'm looking for partners with whom my colleagues and I can assemble movies to finance and bring to market. We do corporate investing as well, but most of the meetings in Cannes are about the business of making, financing, and selling movies. Generally, I'm not meeting with producers here. I would say most of the companies I'm meeting with are distributors, other financiers, sometimes representatives. And what I want, we'll talk about probably further today, what is I want them to know about us, but we're making and looking to make the kind of movies that excite the market, not movies that we can squeak by in the market. So I want them to understand what that is to us, what the key elements of movies and opportunities look like. So that's what it is.
Jessica?
Well, obviously, I'll tell people that I raise and structure financing and sell films, but we too are often meeting with a goal in mind of how do we bring something to fruition? How do we get it made? So we're meeting with, I'm always looking to meet with new investors, new financiers, new distribution companies, and talk about how their model can adapt to our current market, and always looking to do things a little bit differently, and try out new opportunities for distribution and finance.
And Josh?
I guess it depends a little bit on who the person is and why I'm meeting them for the first time, but generally I like to communicate that our company from the very beginning started off as a completely independent, like we never took in financing, we always just kind of lived on our own, from our own bootstraps. And so I think we kind of like to be able to say that there's no mandate for us. So if someone's pitching a project, we try to be so open-minded, and I think we're all looking for just that new exciting thing, something that reminds us how great it is to be here and how great it is to be doing this. And often it is just like one project away. So when someone pitches me something, or I'm meeting because someone reached out and said, like, I have this great project and it's about, a narwhal, or whatever it's about. Great, let's hear what it is. I mean, I have no idea if it could be great or it could be awful, but, we try to be encouraging too. So I try to just, convey that we have some knowledge and we could be helpful if it's the right fit for us.
Everybody needs a good narwhal movie in their slate. Awesome. So let's start with Cannes. You used to hear all of these stories at not just the Cannes market, but some of the others throughout the year about this like fevered overnight bidding wars and people desperate to get something before somebody else snapped it up. And now the reality is that deals happen in the weeks and months that follow. They overlap into other festivals. It's really pretty hard to actually attribute a sale to any given festival most of the time. What would you say is the purpose of these film festivals and markets, including and especially Cannes, in the modern deal-making landscape?
Okay, I can go. I'll go first. Well, several things are happening at once. So I think Cannes to me is the most exciting event on the calendar, and in part because some of the best movies of the year are premiering in the film festival at the same time as some of the best potential movies are being previewed to potential buyers in the marketplace, and lots of other business, documentary, completed film sales, pre-selling of films. It's exciting how much is going on at once. All-night bidding wars in Cannes, I don't think there have been many. I don't remember that many. However, the movies that are premiering in the market, especially for international buyers, these larger commercial movies, those are still selling very aggressively. There aren't that many of them. So I would say there are fewer than there used to be, but I'm feeling now on the street, there are a few movies here that have, intense competition for them. They're the star-driven commercial, generally action movies that are being previewed to buyers. And that feels really good. I think I'm pretty optimistic that there's more and more of that to come. And also, I think there's more attention right now globally on the non-U.S. films that are premiering at Cannes, and we've seen what the life of some of these movies can be when they connect at the festival. So there's maybe even more than in the past, like general excitement about both English language, non-English language movies, festival movies, and market. So it's all pretty great.
And I think the festivals are still really important. I think there's been a question we read about how important are the festivals, but they are really important. They're really important to showcase these films on a big screen to a full audience of real people as well as our community of buyers. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing like getting all of the buyers into a room to see your film and not have to find some other way to screen it for them. So we find it crucial. One thing I've noticed this year is there are fewer films available for sale than I feel I've seen in the past, at least in the actual festival. As Micah said, there's tons in the market, but there's also more, what we're seeing too is more finished films that are available for sale screening in the market this year. Usually we're not using the market to screen a finished film that hasn't gone to a festival, but we are seeing that opportunity this year. And they're not Cannes typical films. They're just solid, commercial, thrilling films that are completed and using this festival and market as an opportunity to showcase them.
Yeah, and jumping off from that, I agree completely. And I think you just have to be very exacting about if a film in the market that doesn't have a hook that's obvious to buyers, that the reason they're going to come see it, it can not go well. But like as one example, we screened a rough cut of The Rise of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is a film we ended up selling to Netflix, and it premiered this year. But that's something that we maybe wouldn't have done 2 years ago, 5 years ago, but because it's sort of, this is of course this very obvious opportunity where all the buyers are here, all the sellers are here, like you leave Cannes and there is, other than maybe Tribeca, there's sort of a feeling of like, see you in the fall, I'm going on vacation. So, this is the robust time when people are engaged. And, we actually show a lot of footage in the market or in just meetings of projects. That's mainly what we're doing this particular Cannes. And that's another time where if we have the right footage and people are excited, it can lead to a big pre-sale, or it can at least create the awareness of a project and start that process going, which, as we just talked about, it can take longer to sell a project if it's an early stage project or a finished film. And that's usually actually an advantage. It's just the fast sales aren't necessarily, because sometimes the first deal out of the gate is not the best deal. So you just take your time, and that seems to work better for all of us these days.
What do you think is the advantage of physically screening finished movies to prospective buyers in a place like this versus in another screening room at LA, or sending a link or something to that effect? Do you think that the creating of the atmosphere actually impacts the resulting outcome, or is it just they're all here so we might as well?
I think, excuse me, I think it depends on the film. There are certain films that having a community of people to see it with is advantageous for a buyer seeing how it's going to play. Does it have, is it theatrical? Is it playing well? That's harder to capture off of a link. It's harder to capture off of a screening room full of only buyers. So I think for us, we're looking at each film and what is its best path? What is the best festival launch for it? Does it feel like it's going to play well in Cannes versus Sundance versus Toronto? And is it something that we want to have a different kind of audience to screen it? So I think each film is its own ecosystem.
It's also, we view it as being very opportunistic, because some buyers in New York or Los Angeles just will not come to a screening. They won't go across town. They'll be waiting for the link, and you just sort of have to deal with that. But in Cannes, they might say, oh, well, I didn't get into that movie, and I have some free time. This is playing. I'll go see it. So we do I mean, of course, depending on what the film is, certain films are going to draw people anyway, but if it's something that you're kind of just throwing the dice to start and that you want it to screen on the big screen and have people, have a chance to see it in that format, when you're seeing it on the link, the stove's boiling over, the dog needs to be fed, you've got to do your laundry. It's just you don't know what's happening and how much they're really paying attention. At least you hope that by doing it this way, you're getting the full attention.
No second screen activity while they're watching the movie.
No control over that, sadly.
What would you say have been some of the most interesting, most significant, for the positive or negative, changes in the appetite from the market this year?
Positive change. Well, I don't know if it's a positive change. There's lots of positivity around demand. Like, I think it's pretty clear. You can see in the United States a growing number of distributors. We are not lacking for distributors, and we're not lacking for distribution slots. So I'd say that and you feel it internationally as well, I think, certainly in my meetings, there's a real appetite and I think a willingness to take risk on what would be considered by buyers the right kinds of movies they actually think can work theatrically in their territory. And so it feels good to know there's a market to sell into, and I think there definitely is a market to sell into. I think at the same time, it's painful for people who have been making movies not necessarily for the market. They've been making movies they want to make, which is fine. It's part of being an artist. But sometimes there's real incompatibility between what people have made, even if it's critically acclaimed, but it's not what most of these distributors want. So that's why I think we have at the same time right now a phenomenon of more and more orphan films that can't find distributors to handle them, and more distributors complaining that they need movies.
I also think that, at the same time, as you said, these are artists and they're creating work that there are people who want to see it. And so a growing frustration that I face is there aren't enough opportunities to get those films out there. There are really good films that may not be commercial or may not be what the distributors ideally want because they know it will work better. But it is hard to figure out always a path for things that are still truly good films, but may not hit that sweet spot for a buyer. And I would like to find the opportunities for those films still. I'm still drawn to them, and I still want to watch them, and it's harder to find homes for them.
I think, and we start our process, and I think we all do this, like getting on the same page. If we believe the film is great and we love it, but it's not obviously commercial, it's like we're testing the water to see, like, are we on the same page? Do we both see it the same way? Because if the expectations are completely out of proportion to the way we think it might unfold, then we won't come on board with that. But I will say that in this market, and going from like Sundance to here, we've sold more of our Sundance films than we have in a couple years. I think it feels like maybe it's sort of a cyclical thing where, as Micah said, there are slots available and buyers are, most of the distributors are not necessarily producing to fill those slots, they're acquiring. So you do get to sort of the circle comes around when they actually need films. And so I hope it's not just a blip, but it feels like we're getting back into a little bit of maybe a subdued normal. They're not like massive $10 million deals, but they are strong, decent deals that the filmmakers and their financiers can feel good about.
I think it's true. I agree. I also think when we began in the business, you may begin before me, but we knew each other at the beginning of my career, and
Year before.
in that era, most of these movies that premiered at film festivals, especially the specialized movies, they went unreleased. Their release was the film festival, and there was a period of time when more and more of them found a home. I mean, not a very long period of time, a handful of years where maybe, it started to feel like there was this studio specialty phenomenon of picking up 7, 8, 9 smaller niche films at festivals. I guess there's less of that happening now amongst studio specialty divisions, but I actually think, more of those movies I think are getting released now than ever before. I don't. That's why I feel like it's it feels to me like there are more distribution happening for more movies, more kinds of movies. I appreciate most of the people making specialty movies. They want a big sale to a big distributor. They want life to be easy. They want to be in profit right away. But that's never really happened. That's not normal. It's a fair ambition, or a dream. But I sort of feel like this system's pretty good. It's kind of working in the sense that most of these movies, the ones you're talking about, in part because of the great work that you'll do and some of your peers, they are going to get released. They're not going to sit on the shelf. So again, I feel like there's not much to complain about, as much as we might want things to be better or even better.
Sorry to jump on you. It's such a good point, though, because you reference films like Coda, and I mean, there's always like the film that you read about that fuels the dreams of financiers and producers and directors, where you think that's going to be me, and it isn't everybody. It never has been. But it does sort of help. I think it helps the ecosystem because it drives people's interest to say, like, if I do the right film, I'm going to be that huge success story someday. So there is an aspirational part of it.
I think one of the things that's also really important is to make the films at the right price point, right? So oftentimes filmmakers will make a film for too much money and that the market can't bear what it costs. And so that goes back to Micah's point of expecting to be recouped off of the sale. I think that's where all of us come in talking about, this is a great film, but this is the budget at which it should be made, so that there's the most optionality for selling it and for doing different kinds of creative deals. We had a film last year called It Ends, which we debuted at South by Southwest, and we ended up doing a very interesting, different model. We released it first on Letterboxd through their new video store. And the financier of that film said, it's risky. I don't know what that will do for the future distribution revenue streams, but we made the film so economically that if I can't take a risk on this, then what can I take a risk on? And it ultimately, we ended up selling it after the Letterboxd window to Neon for a traditional theatrical release and transactional and streaming and all of the things. And that was interesting to do. And I think that, but it could only be done because we had made it so modestly.
It's the reverse K-pop Demon Hunters window. Find the audience on streaming and then put it in theaters, which is a risk and one that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for most movies. But I think that there have been some instances over the past year, especially the last couple of months, that show that people want to come back to the theaters. They want to go see the movies that all of their friends are talking about. And one of the things I heard a lot from people leading up to this is that people are they're really excited about where theatrical is because of Project Hail Mary, Devil Wears Prada 2, Super Mario Galaxy. Like, we're in a good place right now, which has people, feeling a little less down about the long-term theatrical prospects, of which you all know I don't buy into that. The theatrical experience is not terminally ill. Like, we'll be fine. But I'm curious whether you have seen any areas of disconnect between not necessarily what filmmakers want to make and what distributors want to pick up, but between what audiences seem to want to show up for and what filmmakers and distributors are willing to take swings on.
Well, I think you definitely find, I would say we found that out the hard way in a couple of instances, because there are 2 or 3 examples I can think of. One of them is a film called Secret Mall Apartment that is a charming, crazy, great story about people who built an apartment inside a mall and lived there secretly for like 2 years and filmed the whole thing. And it was kind of a feel-good movie, and so many of the streamers were like trying to get their bosses. They fell in love with it. No one would buy it. The filmmakers released it themselves theatrically. It was a huge theatrical hit in the documentary sort of landscape. And then a distributor bought it, then Netflix bought it, and it sort of became a self-fulfilling prophecy when they had to pick themselves up and do it themselves. And so that independent, self-released theatrical set the stage for the other rights to be sold for decent deals. And it's happening again right now in a film called Steal This Story, Please, about this activist radio host, Amy Goodman. She's hugely popular. Distributors weren't really going for it. I think they were a little hesitant because it was mildly political, but it was also not that political because it's sort of a portrait of her as a person. But same thing, they decided to do their own self-release. It's having a huge, success at the box office, and now the distributors are coming back and saying, well, maybe we can be your partner on all the ancillaries and the derivatives and the TVOD and the SVOD. So it's not like what anyone wants to hear, that you have to do your own self-release, and that's not going to be true for every film. But there are examples now, a couple in a row, where it's like, maybe you should take a little more risk. Maybe you should believe our curatorial skills that we're telling you, like, there's a reason why we came on board this film and why we believe it's going to work theatrically. We don't say that every film is going to work theatrically, otherwise our job, the validity would not be there. But we are acting as sort of like a feeder to these companies, and hopefully those examples, they'll listen to us the next time. We'll see.
That's a very good point. And I think when I was thinking about where's a disconnect between audience and distributors, somewhat, I think distributors maybe have over-relied on the idea that IP or IP and genre are not all you need, but so essential and important that maybe quality filmmaking execution doesn't matter quite as much. And I think the truth is the inverse of that, and that we've seen good movies that are based on established IP that has significant following. Those can do exceptionally well, as can good movies that are not based on well-known established IP. And plenty of, I don't want to name them, but like certainly plenty of examples of franchise movies, or new properties based on IP that just weren't executed well. The critics don't like them, the audiences don't love them, they don't do well. So in a sense, I'd say maybe there's been a disconnect because it's pretty clear that the audience wants movies that they will actually like. It is hard, quality is a little harder to predict in advance, and certainly you can't just look at the number, you can't look at a metric to know in advance that something's going to be of quality. But there are lots of executives, not just us, that I think have tried to build a reputation, over time for being pretty good scouts or filters for buyers.
Well, and that's where, a lot of the times where people like you come in, especially early on and in the packaging stage, if it's not on the page, it's not there. Somebody brought up this week, and I'm probably going to butcher it because I didn't hear the quote myself, but George Clooney said something about you can make a bad movie out of a great script, but you can't make a great movie out of a bad script, or something to that effect. And if the story is there, it'll be there on the page, and that that, especially when paired with a well-known, reliable director, is really hard to beat right now. And I'm curious if how the conversations you're having, explaining that with other people, to other people, yes, you should buy this because here, the story is good. The person who's going to make the movie is good. You just have to, believe in it and not worry about the safety net so much.
Well, one thing I would say about that, because this informs our process when we're putting movies together, we're usually not engaging with distributors about a movie until it's been assembled with talent, and certainly the director. And the truth is, I think you're right that a great movie needs to begin its life with a great script, but it's usually the director. It's a great director who's going to recognize the qualities of the script more consistently than the buyers. I don't know that execs are better at reading than directors. And if you really believe in a director and they're really excited about a script and you kind of appreciate its plot, the concept of it as commercial, we'll usually default to the director's read, and I think buyers more and more do that too. Certainly if you look at the big movies, the original movies that got made this year from great directors, I sort of feel like it's the director that excited the studio. And the director either wrote the script or they got excited about the script. But so I kind of think that's the better process.
Ryan Coogler's Narwhal movie, coming soon.
I was also just going to say that I think we often aren't bringing it to the distributors until we know that they can really see what this movie's going to be. I think it's harder for them to take that risk earlier on, which is why we rely on people like Micah to finance our movies and make them into reality so that we can bring it to the distributor to sell to them. So, I personally am not setting as many movies up with a distributor from the get-go. We're looking more of where to make it so that it's financially reasonable, and who are the best partners, and how we get the film financed is more a focus at an earlier stage.
One more thing, and then I'll let you guys have some closing thoughts. You mentioned earlier the concept of aiming for more than just squeaking by. What is your best advice for making that happen?
2 points, and the first one is what Jessica just said, which is budget. If you price your movie appropriately for the market, you're going to have a much better time in the market. Talent agents are not going to price the movie for the market. It's not their job. So it's really the producer's job. It's the producer's job, and if they're working with a finance company like ours, we will figure it out together. But I will say that's kind of by far the most important. Assuming we're talking about talented people making a movie that looks like it might actually be good. Pricing is almost everything. The other thing I would say is if you listen to the market about what they want, it is pretty clear, not every buyer in every territory wants the same movies, but by and large, most distributors want the kinds of movies that have been box office hits again and again from the 70s to the 80s to 2000s. And that includes everything from action, thriller, comedy, romance. It's all the genres. Crowd-pleasing movies from exciting directors, just meaning very talented directors, ideally cast with very promotable talent, well-known, priced appropriately. That's kind of the formula.
Is that all?
Almost. Yeah, that's almost all.
I tease. Jessica?
What is our question?
How do you do
Squeaking
your
by?
job well now to make sure that movies, do more than just get made and squeak by?
I mean, we say no a lot more than we say yes. I mean, we have to. We have to be. That's what we're here to do, is to curate what, and hopefully our taste is good enough to do that with. But I think it's. I feel a little bit repetitive, but I love all types of movies, but it's coming up with a strategy and plan for how to get those different kinds of movies made. We work on films that have $100,000 budgets all the way up to $40 million budgets, and they all have a totally different path. I think I'm always looking, who is probably the right buyer for this? Thinking about the buyer, even if we're not bringing it to the buyer early, who will be the right buyer for this? And that oftentimes dictates at what level we probably should be making it, and how we should be making it, and with whom we should be making it. So, it goes all the way. We're thinking about the theatrical or streaming release before we've even made the movie. We have to be thinking about that.
I'm thinking a little more in the documentary space with this answer, but I think because that's more what we work on. We work on narratives too, but it's a little bit more in that direction for most of our projects. And I think it's really, you said it, but it's strategy 100% for us. There's just any project that we've taken the time and energy and really put the thought into it of, when do we go out with this? Do we show any footage? When are people aware of it? Do we wait to launch it at a festival? Do we try to pre-sell it? All those elements, pretty much every successful deal we've done in the last 5 years, the ones that really worked were the ones that were plotted out for a long time, 6 months or a year. And that inevitably, those are the ones that were coming on board early, and they're not necessarily finished films at that point. When you sign a film at Sundance and it's 8 weeks away or 12 weeks away, it is different, and you have to think differently. But the Sundance launch and some of these other festivals gives it a certain amount of lift on its own, of course. So it's really just being really thoughtful and communicative with the team and making sure that everyone's on the same page. I think that is so key for everything that we do. I think that's the only way to get past just squeaking by.
All right, and last question to end on an optimistic note. Why are you still excited to do your jobs, and why should people in the industry and movie and TV fans at home still be excited about Hollywood?
Okay. Why am I excited about my job? Yeah, I have a great job. It's really interesting. It's challenging, and we feel when we succeed with our work, we can watch our work succeed in the world, and it's fulfilling. It's personally fulfilling. That's why I'm excited about it. Sorry, what's your second question?
Why should people who work in this industry and fans of TV and movies also still be excited despite all of the changes happening to Hollywood?
Well, my point of view is that movies are going to get better and better in the coming years because there's a renewed focus on quality. Without getting into why there's been a slide in quality over the years, but I do think that's universally been the case. There's been an increase in volume, but maybe not an increase in the volume of great movies getting made. And I think there's more and more recognition that great movies are worthy. As you were saying before, people love getting excited about a movie and going to the theater and loving the movie. They want that experience. And I think when I was growing up, people were doing that every other week. I think there's plenty of room for movies that will excite a global audience, that will be successful in theaters, and I think many of us are chasing now that sort of potential rebuilding that culture, and we see the business opportunity in it. So that's why people should be excited. I think that's going to happen.
I love my job. I love this business. I love movies. I love filmmakers. I love being able to help their filmmakers get their films made, get their films seen, and that looks very different on each and every film. But I'm feeling very positive and hopeful this year. I know Josh referenced it earlier, but we have found homes and sold over 15 movies this year, and that's from January to today, and that's a lot. And we're finding more opportunities to do it by sometimes being creative. But I'm quite hopeful and positive, and even with all this change, people still want to see great movies and discover new voices, and that's what we're here to help do.
Yeah, I think it's similar for me. It's like what I would describe as sort of a collective unfolding chain of discovery, and you get, it's like from the time that filmmakers either have a script or they get the rights to a book or they make a project based on someone's life story or whatever it is, and then by the time it gets to us, then we see it and fall in love with it, and we're like, oh my God, we can be part of this. We're part of this story. Then it goes to the publicist and to the festival and then a distributor, and we kind of know that same feeling is going to happen. It's not necessarily for every film. There are films that are different in different ways. Maybe they don't have as wide an appeal or obvious an appeal, but I think that's what just makes it like exciting for everyone, because inevitably when it gets to the consumer and they're like, oh my God, did you see that movie? And they want to recommend it to their friends, and it's just that renewed idea that all the good stories are not over. There are still more to come, and that's always exciting. That's what fuels my love of this, waiting for the next great story that you can get excited about.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Micah, Jessica, Josh. Enjoy the rest of your Friday in Cannes.
Come on.